My mom and brother held a family reunion without me, so I sold the 3.1 million house. My mom and brother held a family reunion without me, so I sold our 3.1 million house out of spite. When I stepped out of the Uber tires, rolling onto the familiar tree-lined street in Boston's Back Bay, I pictured a moment of quiet relief. I imagined the scene in early spring evening tulips just beginning to bloom in the pattern my grandfather had hand-drawn. A glass of cabernet in my hand and soft classical music drifting from the study's speakers. But no. Instead, what hit me was a chaotic spectacle, like a southern wedding gone astray. Cars were parked tightly along both curbs, some spilling onto the grass I'd paid to have trimmed just last week. Thumping music poured out from inside my house, not some convention center. Lights blazed, shadows danced behind the curtains. Someone was laughing loudly on the balcony, where I'd planted climbing roses based on my grandfather's notes. I stood frozen on the sidewalk for a few seconds, gripping my suitcase, trying to process whether this could be a prank. A mix-up, an event booked at the wrong venue. But when I saw the banner strung across the doorway, Morgan Family Reunion, 2025, bringing the generations together, I knew there was no mistake. I hadn't been invited to the family reunion. In my own house. If you've ever come home only to find you're no longer considered part of it, drop a comment. I'd love to know if anyone else has felt like a stranger in the space they call home. I'm Lena Morgan, 34, Director of International Markets for a major tech company. This Zurich trip was a career milestone. I'd just secured a 3-year partnership with Helvetica Banking Systems, a deal worth millions for my company. But I didn't celebrate with colleagues. I missed home, my grandfather's garden, the quiet I thought I'd built from years of solitude. I wanted one private night, a small reward for months of grinding. And yet, I dragged my suitcase through the maze of haphazardly parked cars, across the trampled lawn, my chest tightening with every step, toward the historic 3-story Victorian. My grandfather's lifelong home left to me as per his wishes. The front door was ajar, propped open by a pot of yellow chrysanthemums I'd kept in the greenhouse. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. A wave of sound crashed over me. Laughter kids stampeding up the wooden stairs, the smell of food, cheap perfume, and alcohol fumes competed for every square inch of air. I stood still in the foyer. The antique table where I usually kept a vase was now piled with purses and coats. On the wall, my grandfather's portrait, the one I'd preserved in the study, was moved out here, hung crooked, the frame askew. I stepped deeper into the house, still clutching my suitcase, like it was the only thing that belonged to me. Relatives I'd never met, some vaguely familiar from old photos, called each other by nicknames, exchanging hugs like a TV drama. A distant uncle asked, "Are you from Mabel's side or Richard's?" I replied flatly, "I'm Lena. I live here." In the kitchen, where I'd meticulously restored the vintage tiles, I saw my mother, Elaine. She was wearing an apron, pointing at cabinets, directing caterers as if she owned the place. Her eyes met mine. No surprise, no joy. Just a faint scowl. Rachel. No Lena. "You're back," she said. "I thought you were coming home Sunday." I didn't answer right away. A question hit me like a punch. Why is she here? And I had no idea. "What is this, Mom?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "A family reunion, obviously. I thought you'd be too busy, so you decided to use my house without asking." She waved a hand. "You always complain it's too big, barely used. We're just making use of it." I never said that. Ever. "And Caleb?" I asked. Right on cue, my brother appeared wearing a shirt embroidered with Morgan Family Reunion. Host hair slicked to one side, carrying a tray of drinks. "Wow, surprise." "You're back early." Caleb grinned, avoiding my eyes. "Can you explain this? Mom had the spare key. Remember? She said we should use the space. We hired cleaners, don't worry." I didn't know what made me angrier, their audacity to take over my private space, or the way they spoke like I was a stranger crashing their party. My mother shrugged, still directing the caterers. "Everyone's having fun. It's not a big deal." A sentence I'll never forget. "Not a big deal," she said. A lifetime of memories, years of building a quiet sanctuary, every antique, every book, every plant turned into a playground for 88 people who didn't invite me. I didn't make a scene, didn't argue. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out. No one stopped me. No apologies. Not even a call of my name. As I stepped off the porch, the music behind me played on as if I'd never been there. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer part of it. I was a spectator, in my own house. Have you ever felt that being the odd one, out in a place that's supposed to be yours? If so, share. I want to hear your story. I took an Uber to the Marriott downtown. When I closed the hotel room door, the soft yellow light and steady hum of the AC couldn't hold it back anymore. I cried. Not out of losing control, but because I finally saw it clearly. I was never truly part of my family. I was just a tool, the one with the nice house, the money, the responsibility, but no place. That night in the hum of the AC, I started thinking the unthinkable. What if the house wasn't mine anymore? People say childhood memories are like old film reels, not always clear, but always carrying a scent. For me, it's the damp oak of my grandfather's study, the scratch of his fountain pen on tracing paper, the faint tea tree oil in the spring garden. Those never fade. The Back Bay house wasn't where I was born, but it's where I became myself. No children's laughter, no warm cookie kitchens or crayon-covered walls, like in American family movies. Instead, it was quiet but profound, lasting, and real enough to carve into my soul. I was an odd kid, quiet, reserved, more interested in taking apart electronics than playing with dolls or biking with neighborhood kids. My mother, Elaine, called me an old soul, with a tone half joking, half annoyed. She never really understood me. Over time, I learned I didn't need her approval. Maybe that's why I gravitated to my grandfather, Henry Morgan, like he was my only moral and spiritual compass in those early years. He never criticized my silence. Instead, he listened to it. Henry was a civil engineer designing iconic steel bridges across the eastern U.S. in his youth. He had calloused hands, deep but kind eyes, and a way of speaking like every word was chosen with care. Every Sunday, he'd pick me up from my mother's cramped apartment and bring me to his 3-story wooden Victorian. I still remember my first time in his study, a different world. High ceilings, polished wood walls, bookshelves reaching the roof, and a heavy oak desk smelling of age. He introduced me to the desk like it was a person. This is where it all begins. If you cherish a small corner, you'll know how to keep the whole world. By 10, I was learning logarithms, reading blueprints, identifying bolts. By 12, he gave me my first computer, outdated, but more precious than any gift I'd ever received. They build with concrete, you'll build with code. But both need precision and dignity, he said with a smile. Not everyone understood the weight of those lessons. But I did. I devoured his words like a lost hiker finding a path. If you've had someone, just one, who saw you when the world turned away, you'll know how precious that is. If you've had someone like my grandfather was to me, share it. Let me know you were seen too. My mother, on the other hand, was a woman of standards. An elementary school teacher, strict, always impeccably dressed, measuring success by how many party invitations you got. I didn't fit that mold. I wasn't charming, didn't wear makeup, didn't go to prom. Caleb, my younger brother by 3 years, was the opposite. Outgoing, charismatic, and always forgiven. As a kid, when he got expelled, Mom said he needs a better environment. When his startup failed, she called it an experiment. Me, I dropped one college class to pivot to web programming, and she said coldly, "You lack commitment." That favoritism stung as a child. But as I grew, I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped comparing. I chose to shine in the shadows instead of fighting for the spotlight. I graduated early, started working while my peers were still choosing careers. I spent weekends at my grandfather's house. By then he was retired and living alone. Those afternoons in his study, him writing journals, me coding, were my refuge. He didn't ask about deadlines, didn't push me to date or socialize more. He just looked at me with quiet pride, a look I never got from Mom. That's why I kept coming back to that house week after week for a decade. That's also why, when he passed, I wasn't surprised when the lawyer read his will and the house was left to me. Others were shocked. Mom said he made a mistake. He was old. Caleb smirked. Guess he wanted you to maintain it for us. I just felt sad, because no one understood why I was chosen. But he did. A note tucked in the will read, "For Lena." The only one who knows building is about preserving, not boasting. I moved in 2 weeks after the funeral. Everything stayed as it was. I cleaned every window, reorganized his books by his system. I kept his mahogany desk in the study, placing my computer on it. That's where I applied for jobs, learned blockchain coding, wrote the code that boosted my company's revenue by 300%. Every time Mom came for dinner, she'd roll her eyes. "You should hire a designer for the living room. It's like a museum." I'd smile, serve her more food. I didn't need her approval anymore. I just needed her to be quiet. Caleb kept jumping between projects, cold brew coffee, NFTs, organic drinks. When I offered to help with business plans, he refused. He only wanted cash. I didn't give it. Have you lived in a family where people only cared about what they could take from you, not who you were? If so, tell me. Your story might help someone out there feel less alone. Back in the hotel room that night after the reunion, I stared at the ceiling, trying to recall the last time Mom praised me. I couldn't. But I remembered how my grandfather patted my shoulder when I got my engineering scholarship, whispering, "You've built your own world, Lena. No one can take that away unless you let them." And in that moment, I knew this house, that childhood, it wasn't just memories. It was my foundation. And a true foundation when violated needs protecting. When my grandfather's lawyer, short, stout Arthur Giles, opened his dark brown leather folder and began reading the will's first lines, the room felt quieter than a Sunday morning church. It was a drizzly Boston afternoon, as if the sky sensed what was coming. My family, Mom, Caleb, a few close relatives sat around the large dining table in my grandfather's house, which hadn't been this full since his 80th birthday. He passed gently in his sleep after a lingering cold. No pain, no fuss. His death was like his life, quiet, complete, and timely. When Giles reached the part about assets, I thought he'll divide it evenly. He was always fair. I was wrong. The house at 117 Hanover Street, including all land and contents, is left entirely to my granddaughter Lena Morgan, who I trust will understand and preserve the value of sustainable building. A terrifying silence followed. I didn't dare breathe. Mom stood up. "No way. He made a mistake. Henry definitely made a mistake. This house belongs to the family." Caleb leaned back, smirking. "Is this a joke? He can't be serious." "This is the final will, legally verified and made in sound mind," Giles said, face unmoving. I looked down. Not out of shame, but because I was afraid I'd cry if I met anyone's eyes. Not because I inherited the house, but because no one asked the simple question. Why did he choose you? If you've ever been trusted so deeply no explanation was needed, you'll understand how I felt. And if you've been shunned by your family for a legacy you didn't fight for, but were given, I'd love to hear your story. Maybe we'll find each other in that shared pain. I moved in 2 weeks after the funeral. Not to claim ownership, but because I couldn't stand the air in Mom's rented apartment where I grew up but never belonged. I didn't change much. I sorted his books by topic, cleaned the tea cabinet, added modern blends. The study became my office, but his old mahogany desk stayed bathed in natural light from the stained glass window. I didn't hang his photo in the living room. I kept it on the desk. To me, he wasn't for display. He was for remembering. I still invited Mom and Caleb for holiday dinners. I cooked his favorites, beef stewed in wine garlic toast, simple olive oil salads. Mom always arrived late, bringing cheap wine and critiques. "You should remodel the kitchen. It's so dated. The living room could be amazing with an interior designer." I'd smile sometimes, serve her favorite dish, not because I gave in, but because I'd stopped expecting more. Caleb came occasionally, mostly for free food. Once he brought a new girlfriend, calling the house a vintage mansion. They laughed in the garden, snapping selfies against the tulips I'd replanted from his designs. I said nothing, just quietly picked up the crushed petals. Another time, Caleb called to borrow money for a new venture, a Japanese food truck. I offered to help with financial planning, market research, even logo design. He laughed coldly. "You always want to control everything. I just asked for a loan, not your opinion." Silence followed. We never brought it up again. I was grateful to my grandfather not just for the house, but for giving me the chance to choose how I lived. I thought keeping the house untouched would preserve my best memories of him. But the quiet dinners, Mom's cold glances, Caleb's dismissive jokes made me realize not everyone saw what I was trying to protect. They saw the house as a prize. I saw it as a lesson. A lesson about kindness, about doing right, even when no one stands with you. Have you ever felt out of place in what should be your sanctuary? Ever felt you had to apologize for being trusted more than others? If so, leave a comment. Those who've stood alone in a crowd will understand. I remember a winter evening about a year after moving in, sitting alone by the second-floor window where he'd hung his old binoculars. Outside, snow fell lightly, streetlights casting soft gold streaks through the frosted glass. I looked at the garden. The flower beds were covered for winter. The wooden chair where he'd read newspapers was dusted with frost. I missed him so much it hurt. Not because I was sad, but because I knew if he were alive he'd say, "You've kept your promise, Lena, but don't let it hold you back." And I started thinking, what if one day I wasn't here anymore? What if one day I let go of this house I thought I was used to feeling like I didn't belong? But I was wrong. Nothing prepared me for that moment, standing in the middle of my own house, surrounded by family, feeling like an intruder. The pop music blaring from the living room speakers, music I'd never allowed at that volume, hit my ears like an assault. Cigarette smoke wafted through, clinging to curtains, wood floors, and the plants I'd tended after winter. The front yard tulips, replanted to match my grandfather's onward design, were now a trampled playground for kids playing tag. A teak bench he'd ordered from Tennessee was shifted, leaving circular scratches like open wounds on the hand-laid brick path. By the koi pond, a drunk stranger tossed coins into the water, wishing for luck. I wanted to scream that copper kills fish, but my throat closed up. No one noticed me. They smiled, drank, chatted, as if I were a maid who'd wandered into their party. Have you ever walked into a space that was your sanctuary and found it turned into something? Loud, ordinary, soulless, if you have leave a note. I need to know I'm not the only one. Inside the house, his house. My house had become an anonymous banquet hall, aluminum folding tables, wrinkled tablecloths, a name tag station, and a guest book. I walked through the hallway, dodging relatives, snapping selfies with my grandfather's misplaced portrait. His study, my workspace, was now a dessert buffet with cakes and chocolate fondue. My laptop, carefully stored, was shoved aside, replaced by stacks of plastic plates. Kids drew on the windows with crayons. I opened the study door unlocked. Something in me broke. His desk. The 200-year-old mahogany desk. The one he'd said a true craftsman makes even the underside of a drawer beautiful. No one sees it, but it matters. Now it bore a water ring from a beer glass, a 20-centimeter scratch, and worst of all, a burn mark, small but deep like charcoal on white paper. I stood frozen. My breathing shallowed. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to collapse without a word. Oh, that Caleb walked in holding a beer. Probably someone put a candle on it. No big deal. The scratch, you can buff it out. I turned to my brother, the one I'd helped pay off credit card debt, wrote job reference letters for Shielded when his ventures failed. Now he just shrugged like I was overreacting. "This is Grandpa's desk," I said, each word deliberate. "You know that. It's just a desk, Lena. You're making it a big deal." I didn't respond. Mom Elaine walked into the kitchen where I stood by the counter, feeling like a stranger. "Lena, what's wrong?" "Everyone's having fun. Don't make this tense." She wore a new dress, curled hair, a crystal hairpin. She looked younger than her age, and she looked at me like I was a mess to clean up. "You don't see anything wrong with holding a party here without asking me? You're always busy. You said the house is too big for one person. We just wanted everyone to enjoy it. Your grandfather would have wanted this." That last sentence was the final cut. "Don't speak for him, Mom," I said, my voice trembling but low. "He left this house to me not because I'm its owner, but because I'm the only one who respected him. Respected this space." She sighed, shaking her head like I was a child who didn't get it. I turned away, said nothing more. No one followed me to the door. Outside, a light drizzle started. Tiny drops hit my face, mixing with the ones rolling from my eyes. I don't cry loudly. I never have. But the tears fell. Quietly. Truly. I dragged my suitcase, still there from when I arrived, back through the wet leaves, past the parked cars, past every broken expectation. No one called out. No one stopped me. I didn't look back. That night at the Marriott, I sat by the window watching taxis glide through the streets. Boston kept moving, oblivious to what had happened. But inside me, something died. a long-held endurance, a fragile hope that if I tried hard enough they'd understand. Love me the way he did. I started thinking about loss, about boundaries, about choices. If a house is no longer a place where you're respected, is it still a home? Have you ever had to walk away from something sacred because those around you no longer deserved it? If you have, share. Your story might give strength to someone hesitating. That night I opened my laptop and typed a name I'd memorized, Victor Yang, the man who'd offered to buy the house months earlier. I didn't hit send, but in my heart a door cracked open. I didn't sleep a minute that night. Not out of anger, not out of sadness, but because my mind, long used to suppressing, finally stood up and pointed out what I'd avoided for years. I was never truly seen as part of my family. On the hotel bed, under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, memories came like waves, gentle but sharp. I remembered my 8th birthday, when Mom threw a party and invited my whole class. She ordered a strawberry cake. I'm allergic. When I cried, she said, "Stop making a fuss. Your friends are having fun." I ate dry crackers the whole party. At 17, when I got a full engineering scholarship, she asked, "Are you sure you want this? Tech is so dry for a girl." Meanwhile, Caleb failed 3 semesters in a row, but got a ski trip to distress. My college graduation summa cum laude, Mom and Caleb arrived an hour late. She blamed traffic, but they'd stayed to watch Caleb's semi-final soccer game. Have you ever realized you've spent a lifetime trying to be loved, only to see that some love never comes no matter how hard you try? If you've had that moment, share it. Maybe in your silence, someone else will find themselves. I opened my laptop. My email inbox appeared. An old subject line from Victor Young glowed in the list, Re Morgan House. Still interested. Short. Direct. I hadn't replied before, but this time I had no reason to delay. I didn't hit send yet. I was still in a storm of thoughts, but just pulling up that email felt like placing my hand on a doorknob. I hadn't opened it, but I knew I was about to step through. The phone clock read 2:17 a.m. I called Hannah. Hannah and I met in 6th grade. She was the only one who ever said, "You're not weird. You're just not as cheap as the rest of them." I loved her bluntness the way I loved my grandfather's silence, each their own anchor in a sea of fleeting people. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Lena, what's wrong?" Her voice was hoarse but alert. They held a family reunion. In my house, while I was gone. No heads up, a pause. Then slowly, in your house. "Yeah." Mom used the emergency key, Caleb hosted. Guests trashed the garden, scratched furniture, put food on Grandpa's desk. "Lena." Hannah swallowed hard. "You're kidding, right? This isn't disrespect anymore. It's invasion." I laughed, not happily. Mom said, "We just wanted everyone to enjoy the house." Caleb said, "It's the family's house." "Are you telling me a real story or a script for Toxic Family the movie?" Hannah snapped. "Lena, this isn't normal. Not even close." I went quiet for a moment. "I'm thinking about selling the house." Hannah didn't answer right away. "Then, if I were you, I'd have sold it ages ago." "But you're not me. You live for meaning. You love that house. You love him." I nodded, though she couldn't see. "But I think he wouldn't want you stuck because of a beautiful memory. A place that's just a shell being exploited." After the call, I grabbed a water bottle from the mini fridge, set it on the desk. Next to it was the Zurich contract, a 7-figure deal with Helvetica Banking Systems. I'd brought millions to my company, but I couldn't protect a desk. The irony made me laugh, and after the laugh, just emptiness. Dawn crept in. Pale blue light slipped through the hotel curtains, pooling on the floor, like a gentle reminder a new day arrives ready or not. I sat down, hands on the keyboard. Typed Victor. "If the offer's still open, I'd like to talk." I stared at the words for a long time. Not out of hesitation, but because I knew from here everything would change. Not just the house, but how I defined myself no longer, the one trying to please, no longer the one enduring to preserve. I hit send. I don't know if you've ever made a decision that hurt, but felt like the rightest thing you could do. If you have, I want to hear it. Because sometimes courage isn't in enduring, it's in knowing when to let go. And so after a sleepless night, I was no longer the keeper of the house. I was the one ready to let it go. Some meetings don't need long introductions. Some people with one handshake let you know they're here to do business, not to coddle. Victor Young was that kind of person. We met at a cafe on the 33rd floor of the Prudential Building, Boston, framed in clear glass morning light, hitting every leather chair. Victor was already there, iPad in hand, calm as if he'd just left a Zurich investment conference, not preparing to buy a house full of family memories. Lena. He stood, shaking my hand. I'm not surprised you reached out. Just surprised it was sooner than I expected. I smiled, measured. Not emotional, not fake. I'm not good at dragging out what's already clear. Victor nodded, sliding the iPad toward me. A contract appeared on the screen. The first line in bold purchase offer. Morgan Residence, 3.1 million cash, no contingency. No haggling, no conditions. A number as clear as an irreversible choice. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't shock me. It amused me. Because the place that was once my entire world was now reduced to a tidy sum. I'm not just buying a house, Victor said, as if reading my mind. I'm buying a structure with history, and I promise not to destroy its original spirit. I nodded, saying nothing. Some promises you learn not to trust, not because people are bad, but because hearts change. I signed anyway. If you've had to let go of something, not because you stopped loving it, but because you were no longer respected for holding its share with me. I believe someone out there has crossed this threshold too. 3 days later, Mom called. No pleasantries, no preamble. You're selling the house. Her voice was cold, sharp. Yes, that's Grandpa's house. The family's house. No one has the right to sell it. He left it to me, full rights, legally. A pause. Then if you sign, I'll get a lawyer. You won't live in peace. I exhaled, quietly, then said softly, I don't need peace with you. I need peace with myself. I hung up first. That afternoon, Caleb showed up at my hotel. Rumpled shirt, messy hair, dark circles under his eyes. You're really doing this? He asked, no preamble. What do you think? I know you're mad. But selling the house is too far. If Grandpa knew, you know what I cut him off. You always use him as a shield for your irresponsibility. He wasn't the man you describe. He trusted me. You never understood why. Caleb looked at the floor. He didn't argue, didn't apologize. But for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Loss. Not just for the house, but because he knew this time I wasn't coming back. If you need to keep some stuff, he said, voice low, I won't take anything. I just hope you don't disappear from the family. I looked at my brother. Part of me wanted to reach out, but the part that had been hurt too long whispered, it's too late. What's family, Caleb? I asked. People who think they can destroy because they share your name, or people who know when to stop? He didn't answer. I closed the door. 3 days later, I met Victor at the lawyer's office. The black ink pen slid across the paper in silence. One signature, then another. I set the pen down, looked up at Victor. Thank you, I said. Not for buying the house, for helping me end it the right way. Victor didn't smile. He just nodded like someone who understood what I didn't need to say. On the way back, I drove past the house one last time. Didn't stop. Just slowed enough to see the second-floor window where I used to read with him. No music played. I didn't cry. I just whispered like a farewell. The line was crossed. No going back. Have you ever said goodbye to something you loved because you couldn't keep getting hurt? If you have, I want to hear it. Because in every painful goodbye, there's sometimes the start of a rebirth. I never thought I'd be the villain in a family social media war. But the morning after the sale was recorded in the public notary system, it began. Some cousin, I can't recall the last time we spoke, posted a long rant on Facebook. Henry Morgan's house, a symbol of kindness and tradition, has been sold. For money. For selfishness. Some people choose material over legacy. Those of us who value family can only mourn in silence. The post got hundreds of shares. Comments poured in from distant relatives I'd met once at weddings or funerals, piling on raised in his house, and you sell it. No blood in her veins to understand family. Heard she's in tech, thinks she's above us now. Not one asked why I did it. Not one mentioned the burned desk, the trampled flowers, or the years I was the only one returning to that house every weekend. Have you ever been made the villain in your own story? If so, share. I bet you know what it's like to be labeled without anyone asking, is that true? I turned off my phone. But I couldn't turn off the sting in my chest. Not because they were wrong, but because they didn't want to be right. They just needed an excuse to justify their outrage. My selling the house became the perfect test who still loved the family who betrayed tradition. That night, I got a message from Melissa, a cousin from my mom's side. We weren't close, but we'd gone to school together for a year. I saw Amy's post, and all this noise. Just want to say, I know you're not who they're making you out to be. I hesitated, then replied, thanks. But you know, no one cares about the truth when they want an easy story. Melissa responded minutes later. Learned this in college. Every family member has their own version of what happened. Sometimes those versions don't need truth, just the feeling of being right. That's scary. I don't know if I cried, but I sat still for a long time. The days after I worked like a machine, signing deals, handing over papers, answering lawyers. Each step cleared away layers of memories, pieces of the life I'd lived. No one asked if I was okay. I didn't expect them to anymore. One morning, packing the last item, my grandfather's pocket watch, I looked at the empty room, and I realized maybe I was the one holding on to an illusion. I thought family was something I had to preserve at all costs, that if I endured enough, sacrificed enough, they'd see and value me. But reality is not every bond can be saved with one-sided love. Family without mutual respect and responsibility is just a concept used to control. Have you ever woken up one day and realized the place you thought was safest was actually where you got hurt the most? If so, I'd love your comment. Your story might ease the weight for someone going through it. A week later, I left Boston. No farewell party, no announcement. I took an early flight to San Francisco, where I'd been invited to join a humanitarian blockchain project. My grandfather's dream build things that connect people more fairly. On the plane at 30,000 feet, the sky felt untouchable, free from judgment, free from ties. I don't know what'll happen to those I left behind. I'm not sure if they'll understand why I had to go. But I know one thing, I'm no longer clinging to an illusion. A week after leaving Boston, I got an email from Victor. Subject, something you should see. I opened it. One line, I thought you'd want to know this. Attached was a photo. I clicked. It was the desk. The desk that had been burned, scratched, treated like a disposable table. Now it was restored, like it had never been harmed. The wood gleamed, the burn mark gone. The ancient grain shone under fresh polish, warm and true to its original depth. Drawer handles were replaced with exact replicas of my grandfather's choice. Even a small nick on the leg, one he'd kept for authenticity, remained. Not overlooked, but preserved because someone knew not every flaw should be erased. I stared at the photo. A strange feeling rose like touching time through glass. I scrolled down. Victor's final line. The person who sent me this desk for restoration was named Caleb. I read it at least 5 times. Caleb. No heads up. No explanation. No text. No call. Just action. I don't know how he got the desk. Don't know where he found the restorer. Don't know if Victor thanked him. None of that mattered. Some apologies don't need words. Some changes don't need promises. Have you ever seen someone grow not through a speech, but through a quiet act? If so, tell me. Maybe that's the first step toward forgiveness. I cried. Not out of anger. Not out of romanticized emotion. But because for the first time my brother, who'd laughed when I was insulted, stood by while the house was wrecked, did something right without seeking credit. I don't know what drove him. Guilt, maybe. Memory. Or perhaps family in his clumsy way. But what I know, my heart softened. I didn't forgive right away. But I cracked open a small door just enough for light to slip through. I replied to Victor with one line, "Thank you for telling me, and for preserving it the right way." He responded in a minute, I'm just the executor. Some things only mean something when done by family. That night I texted Caleb. I saw the desk. Thank you, he replied with one emoji, meaning I'm not sure, maybe want to talk, or simply, I miss him. I didn't overanalyze, I just saved the message. In a world where people loudly share their anger, but hide their growth, I've learned to watch for what's unspoken. My brother never said sorry, but that act to me was louder than any apology I'd ever gotten. Our relationship can't go back to what it was, but maybe it can start anew, a truer, slower version with fewer expectations, because growing up isn't about never making mistakes. It's about daring to fix what you broke. Some discoveries come when you least expect, not in chaos, but in quiet. Not in pain, but in a moment that feels ordinary. I returned to Boston a week before the house handover, not out of regret. I just wanted to personally clear the garden, the last part still true to my grandfather's spirit. Though the buyer promised to keep the design, I felt I had to put the final period myself. The tulips were past blooming, wilted stems, soft, damp soil. I knelt to clear dry leaves, pull weeds, remove the stone borders he'd laid by hand. Digging gently at a rotted bulb, my trowel hit something hard. I stopped, brushed the dirt. A small wooden box emerged, old but sturdy. The lid was hand-carved, with 3 letters, Lem, Lena, Elaine, Morgan. The carving was slanted, slightly uneven. I opened it. Inside was one thing, a yellowed paper folded in quarters edges, frayed, but the writing clear. My mother's handwriting. I sat on the wooden bench, hands trembling, as I unfolded the letter. Lena, if you're reading this, it means I still have hope. Hope that one day you'll be strong enough to return to this garden and patient enough to forgive. I never knew how to be the mother you wanted. When you were little, I thought you were strange. You didn't like dolls' parties or pink dresses. I was ashamed. I thought, how can my daughter be so different? But now I see. Every hour you spent with Grandpa soldering circuits was you finding a language I couldn't read. Every time you aced a science project, I was jealous because I never did anything remarkable, and I turned that jealousy into criticism. I'm sorry. I'm not writing to justify myself. I just want to say I may have failed as your mother, but I never stopped thinking of you. And if you still have any faith in blood, believe that I'm learning to change. I buried this letter after Grandpa passed, because I knew if I didn't write it, some things would be buried with him. One day, if you find this no, I don't hate you. I just didn't know how to love you the way you needed. Mom, I folded the letter, held it in my lap, and sat in silence. No tears. Just a hollow in my chest filled with a sad note. Not every apology comes on time. But that doesn't mean it's worthless. Have you ever gotten a late apology? One that made you see they weren't bad, just too late to be good, if so, share. Maybe someone needs to read it to dare forgive. I set the box back on the ground, didn't rebury it. I placed it on the desk, once damaged, now restored. A week later, I handed the house to Victor. I didn't mention the letter, but I left the box on the bookshelf with a note. Don't throw it away. Someone might need it someday. Not everything needs to be understood right away. Some things need time, like tulips, need winter to bloom. As a kid, I thought family was a stable system like an OS, install it right, and it runs smoothly, hit a bug, just reboot. But growing up, I learned family isn't an OS. It's a patch that's never finished. Complex, messy, uncontrollable. After everything, I didn't return to Boston to reclaim family. I returned to reclaim myself, a version buried under duties and expectations. I started living alone in a small San Francisco apartment. Not fancy, not near the ocean, but with a kitchen. I designed a bookshelf I built, and a desk lamp I bought because it reminded me of his. I started therapy at Hannah's urging, but I realized talking to someone who doesn't judge, who doesn't need defending or explaining, is a way to pick up your pieces. Caleb, from what I've seen on Hannah's Instagram, we still don't text, often started learning carpentry. Not college, not a startup. Real trade sawing, chiseling, drafting, plumbing, building. Once he posted a photo fixing an old porch roof for an elderly woman in Lynn. Captioned some things you only understand why they're precious after you fix them. I didn't like the post, but I read it 3 times. Mom is still Mom. But softer, it seems. Hannah says she volunteers at the city library sorting books, reading to kids, sometimes advising young moms on party outfits. Once I got a letter from her. Not email. Real paper fountain pen, her familiar handwriting, but less rushed. No apology. Just a note that the tulips bloomed again after the season without care, and she's starting to see that some things just need the right roots. The rest grows naturally. I didn't reply right away, but I kept the letter on my shelf next to his photo in the pocket watch. We don't force forgiveness. We don't try to go back to how it was. We just show up. One day, Caleb texted asking if I'd want lunch if I was in Boston for spring. I nodded. No expectations, just curious. What's it like to eat with people who hurt you if you don't talk about the past? We ate at an old Italian place in the North End. Mom came too. No one mentioned the house. No one brought up that day. We ordered like 3 normal people, and for the first time in years we ate without arguing, without jabs, without speaking for each other. We just ate and laughed. I don't know if you've had a moment like that when you're not forced to forgive, but your heart feels wide enough to let go of resentment. If you have share it. Because healing doesn't start with erasing pain, it starts with sitting with it and choosing to live on. No family is perfect, but if the people in it are willing to learn how to show up, not to control, not to judge, just to be there, that's already more beautiful than any legacy. A text came on a drizzly San Francisco afternoon while I was tidying my bookshelf. The phone buzzed once. Sender Victor Young. Lena, thought you'd want to see this. I opened the photo. The world's noise faded. It was the garden, not the bare dirt I'd left. The tulip beds were replanted to my grandfather's onward design. Stone borders realigned in ellipses, a wooden chair back where he'd read each morning. In the center, the desk placed like a relic, not a party prop, no beer glasses. The second photo zoomed in on the desk. Smooth wood afternoon light highlighting every grain. On it, Victor had placed a small bronze plaque, Henry Morgan, engineer, grandfather builder of quiet legacies. I didn't realize I was smiling until tears fell. Victor texted I didn't tear down the house. I honored its history. And the man who made it. Memories don't live in brick walls. They live in how people carry on after leaving the house. I thought preserving meant keeping everything the same. But really, it's about choosing what's worth carrying forward. Maybe my grandfather wouldn't care if the house stood or fell. But he'd care how I lived, what I did with the life ahead. Have you ever clung to a thing, a place, a habit? Thinking letting go would erase part of you, if so, tell me. Because sometimes keeping memories isn't about holding tight. It's about choosing what to take along. I invited Mom and Caleb to dinner at my new apartment. No special occasion, no big announcement. Just a simple evening, 3 people, a small table dishes I cooked, sourdough bread, ginger, sweet potato soup, kale salad, mint tea. I placed a vase of tulips in the center. Said nothing about their meaning. Mom saw them, nodded, slightly poured her own tea. Caleb picked up the pocket watch I'd set by his plate and smiled. You still kept it. Still runs perfectly, I said. No one mentioned the past. No apologies. No what-ifs. We ate, shared small talk. Mom told of a girl at the library reading thicker books than she ever did. Caleb recounted getting stung by a bee while roofing. No drama. No tension. Just 3 people living in sync, not trying to blend into one. And maybe that's enough. After dinner, Mom handed me a small paper bag. Just some odds and ends. Keep what you want or don't. I opened it after they left. Inside was his notebook of homemade ink recipes, a photo of us 3 when I was 7, and a new letter brief. If you're okay, I'm not worried anymore. But if you ever waver, don't forget no one walks alone forever. I folded it, placed it on the shelf beside the garden letter. No more resentment, just things left unsaid and not needing to be said to understand each other. I sat by the window watching distant lights, holding a warm mug of tea. No past in my head, no future, just the present and the feeling. Finally, I'm living my own life, not a role for someone else. Some wounds don't hurt anymore, but touching them still makes your heart dip. I stood in the tulip garden a year after the handover when spring returned like a kept promise. No barriers, no construction. Just rows of flowers blazing in the morning sun, aligned to my grandfather's onward design he'd drawn when I was a kid. more into circuits than dolls. I took a deep breath. No paint or brick dust, just damp earth green and air as gentle as my heart. No, I'm not haunted anymore. A year ago, I was on the sidelines of my own life, left out of parties' decisions praise that should have been mine. But from that sideline, I saw clearly no one can pull you to the center if you don't step forward yourself. I used to think forgiveness meant going back. That if I was kind enough, generous enough, things would return to how they were. But now I know forgiveness isn't an undo button. It's a door opening forward, not forcing anyone to follow, but giving you the freedom to move on. I turned to Mom. She stood quietly by the garden's edge, holding a bundle of freshly cut tulips. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. A smile came light as a breeze. "I feel light." She looked at me for a moment, then said softly, her voice trembling like the first time I heard her read poetry, "Your grandfather would be proud. Not for keeping the house, but for choosing what's right." I didn't ask what right meant. Some answers don't need words. They just need your heartbeat to feel them. I sat on the old stone bench by the flower bed's fingers brushing the repainted wood. Beside me was Caleb peeling an apple with our grandfather's pocket knife, each doing our own thing, breathing our own rhythm. No interrupting, no awkwardness. In the past year, Caleb has roofed over 10 houses. Mom started a reading club for seniors, and I rewrote software for a nonprofit. Nothing extraordinary. But each small act feels like weaving back threads long broken. We're not rebuilding the old family. We're building a new one, imperfect, but real. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this family isn't always where you feel safe. But that doesn't make you love it less, just love it more wisely. Have you ever forgiven someone not because they deserved it, but because you deserved peace? If so, share. Because forgiveness sometimes doesn't save others, it saves you. Before leaving the garden, I looked back one last time. Not to hold on, but to affirm I was here. I chose what needed choosing, and I'm ready to move forward. That night in my small San Francisco apartment, I typed the final line for a personal project I'd long nurtured, an app connecting people hurt by family, to share without judgment, without needing to explain. I named it Onward, because I believe no one is meant to stay stuck, not even in pain. When I started this story, I didn't think it would take me, or maybe you, this far. But from the cracks, the disappointments, the betrayals, and the quiet moments of forgiveness, I learned the most important thing: family isn't fixed. It's a process where we learn to show up, accept, and love in a new way. My story isn't perfect, but if you've seen yourself in these lines trying, hurting, growing, then maybe we're not alone. If this journey touched you, leave a comment. Share, so this story isn't just mine, but ours. And if you believe everyone deserves freedom from binding molds, hit follow. This journey isn't over, we're just beginning,